Live from the Shooting from the Lip studio in Louisville, Kentucky, it's the KT Unearthly Show with your hosts, Kevin Hale and Tiffany Mack.
Hey people, Kevin Hale here with tonight's KT Unearthly Show. It's Friday night, August 26, 2016. Here with my partner in crime, the one and only Tiffany Mack. T-Mac, what is up?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going.
It's been a long day, hasn't it?
Long day. Actually, not only has it been a long day, for various reasons, it's been a long night so far too. But, here we are. A little different twist to tonight's show. We are experiencing some issues with Blog Talk Radio, which is keeping us from doing a live show. But as they say, the show must go on. We have a contingency, like good shows would do. When something, doesn't go as planned, you got to have a backup plan. So the backup plan is that we will do a show tonight. We are going to record. Our guest tonight has been gracious to bear with us for this experience, but I think it's, whether he'll admit it to, he's probably been entertained, these last few minutes too. It's KT Unearthly Show. You can find our show on YouTube and iTunes. Twitter at The Shooting Lip, at Tiffany Mac _ET, at Kevin Hale 423. You can like us. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, Shooting from the Lip and the KT Unearthly Show. Nice show lined up tonight. Tiffany will let you share the guest info soon. But as we always start the show off, our little tongue-in-cheek, we go from the KT Unearthly to the TK4 play. And you sent me a cool little article that could robot aliens exist? Yes, they could exist.
Oh, yeah. Well, the article is actually written by Stephen Dick back in August of 2013. And it says that, the existence of a race of sentient robots or alien robots might not just be possible, but inevitable. And in fact, we might be living in a post-biological universe right now in which intelligent extraterrestrials have exchanged organic brains for artificial ones. And I really think that's a great idea because a lot of humanity, they don't use their darn brains anyway. So when it comes to Blog Talk Radio tonight, I'm right in line with that. They should be using a little bit better brain. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. This article, when I pulled it up, one of the first things that came to mind was War of the Worlds. And which actually, when you look at the article, it says it, but the title itself, could robot aliens exist, immediately made me think War of the Worlds. And then I open it up and there's the picture of the art book from the book.
Yep.
Yeah, why not? Isn't that who we are when, we drop off some four-wheeled device or machine on Mars or
some rover?
Exactly. Isn't that the same thing?
I think so. But, I think it has to do with, the mental capacity, too.
True.
We are limited individuals. Humanity is limited by experience, not just intelligence, experience and education. But think about it. What if you were able to transfer all of the information in the Encyclopedia Britannica, which people from today, the kids today, probably have no idea what that even is. Think about that. What if you had the ability to download all of that information into your brain, just like using one of those SD chips or a thumb drive? And it looks like that may be a possibility.
I agree. Our rover, it's remote control. Are these alien robots, are they per se real-time thing, or is it being controlled from a mothership, or I don't know how that would work.
Well, think about the AI, and there's been movies about this. It's like
artificial intelligence. Yeah,
you've got these beings who are like cyborgs, but they're learning on the go, but they're learning at such a high capacity that, you know, you can't hardly beat them. There's no way. You know, with humanity, we're limited. I think that it's the only way it's going to go is in the form of artificial intelligence. There's going to be more robots being used. We've been using them at, like you said, as rovers and things on Mars or the moon or whatever. We've sent out these satellites into space, and it's only going to get more interesting as we go, more dynamic and more amazing. I mean, things that were science fiction 50 years ago or 70 years ago, 60 years ago are becoming the norm for today.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And then, you know, when you think about it too, when we're exploring space, you know, whether it's with our satellites or, you know, the rover device, who's to say once we get to a certain point in space mm-hmm. that the people on the other side of the fence will see us, you know, as alien as well, or
oh yeah,
you know, and
oh absolutely, you're right.
Mm-hmm. I'm still waiting for one of our satellites to get to a point where some laser beam has just shot it out brought it down. I hope to see that kind of stuff in my lifetime.
Oh, I'd like to. I don't know if they'll show us. Well, I don't know if we'll be privy to that, but it'd be awesome to be on that end of it, to be able to see that information. But it does seem like, you know, there may be a robotic race that exists already, or, you know, that will. But given the limitations of biology as we know it, the force of cultural evolution, and the imperative to improve intelligence, you know, the chances are greater, you know, than just 50-50 is what this article is saying. So I totally agree. And I think that it's just a matter of time before we are, as American people and the people of Earth, I think it's just a matter of time before we are enlightened by the fact that it's very, very prevalent.
I'll add one more thing, and then I'm going to let you introduce our guest, and we'll bring him on. Mm-hmm. Is, you know, as we talk, you know, the possibilities out there, one of the articles I did send to you that I find very intriguing was the Earth-like planet that was recently discovered. It's discovered in the Proxima Centauri's orbit. It's
4 light years away.
4 light years, which is pretty damn close. Mm-hmm. Everything they're saying about this is Earth 2. And if there's a way. If that's whether that's Earth 2 or we come to find out down the road that that's Earth 1 and we're Earth 2, because you know, right now I'm very intrigued by our capabilities, that, you know, how we're finding things. I do want them to happen now more than ever, sooner than later.
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Plus, it just gives us topics to talk about on our show.
So, that's the only reason.
That's the main reason. Exact selfish reasons, you know. But Tiff, introduce our guest and let's get him on.
All right. So tonight we have Ruben Uriarte, and Ruben has been a member of MUFON for over 20 years and is currently the state director for Northern California. He was formerly a state coordinator for Crop Circle Phenomenon Research International and research director for Beyond Boundaries, a UFO tour company. He also serves on OPUS, the Organization for Paranormal and Support Understanding, as a board member. Ruben is now the liaison between MUFON and its counterpart in Mexico, OMIFO. Is that pronounced properly?
Oh, very, very good. OMIFO, yes.
OMIFO, okay. So, you know, we've brought Ruben on tonight to discuss one of the sort of stories that have been pushed aside or not really discussed as much, and he's been a very big part of bringing this forward. And it's called the Cisco Grove UFO Encounter, and he wrote a book called Aliens in the Forest, the Cisco Grove UFO Encounter. And the main character is Donald Shrum, and he and his family are from Arkansas. He moved to Sacramento area, but he had an encounter that was just so bizarre. it really, really shocked me because it does involve a character who is more like a robot. He describes him as a robot, and it doesn't sound like any other encounters that I've come across. So this story, this encounter, this account is very bizarre, and it's a little bit difficult to comprehend. But I think that we may start seeing more of these, or recognize that these are encounters that sound like something that we as humans going into the great unknown may start to do the exact same thing. We may be doing the same thing. So thank you for coming on. Let's get this ball rolling. I've been chomping at the bit for 45 minutes. But Ruben, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing hello there, Kevin. I'm doing very, very good there, Tiffany, and I appreciate very much the invitation. I know there are times that things do happen, and when you have radio shows, but heck, you folks were able to do it, so I'm happy to be here. And unfortunately, my friend and co-author Noe Torres wasn't able to join us tonight, but I'll go ahead and do the best job I can to give you folks and the audience an overview about this extraordinary case that happened back in 1964.
First of all, how did you come across this encounter? Is this somebody that you knew personally, or is this somebody you found through your MUFON connections? How did this whole story come about?
Well, all of the above, actually.
Okay.
What happened was, Tiffany, I'm my former director of Northern California. I was the assistant. We had acquired the files of a gentleman whose name was Paul Cerny. And Paul was a investigator with NICAP. And that organization goes way back during the 50s. It was before MUFON. Now, what happened was I was able to acquire all these files, and I was going through them. I was just thumbing through, looking at this file and that. And then I came across this one file called the bow and arrow case. And I started looking through it, and I said, holy cow, this is a story about a bow and arrow hunter who went hunting with his buddies, and then he decided to go out and hunt. It was getting kind of dark. And then what happened was he got lost, and it was too dark for him to go back to his campsite, so he climbs up a tree to avoid predators, and then later he sees a bright light, thinking that it might be maybe a search and rescue team, or someone was looking for him, maybe a helicopter, and it turned out to be a spaceship. And from there, he basically had a battle, like War of the Worlds, because this large ship had another scout ship that was ejected from the mothership, as we call it, and it landed. And these humanoids came out along with this robotic creature. What's interesting was that they weren't interested in him first. What I find really interesting is that these humanoids were basically like scientists. They were looking at rocks, they were studying the plants, and then gradually they came right up to the tree. So I was reading this material, and I was just blown away. And then through synchronicity, I was able to meet Mr. Don Shrum and his family. They invited me to their home, thanks to a fellow colleague who knew them. And I stayed over, and I happened to have the file with me. And the gentleman, Mr. Paul Cerny, he's the one that conducted the investigation nearly 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago. What I did was I was able to utilize a lot of the information that Paul had indicated in the transcript. So I had a chance to re-interview Mr. Don Shrum about his unusual case. And I have to tell you, when someone experiences something like that is so strange and out of the ordinary, it's basically still in shock in some respects. I mean, he actually relived the whole scenario with me as I was asking him the questions, and fortunately we were able to have the interview recorded by his son. As a result of that, you're going to hopefully hear tonight, I have about 7 audio clips of our interview. Mm-hmm. We have about 15 or 16, but this will just give you an overview about his case. But the fact that he came across these beings that were trying to capture him, and he fought them all night as he was up on a tree. He did use his arrows, his bow and arrows against the robotic creature, which later on we'll get into it. This case happened in Northern California, approximately in an area known as Cisco Grove. It's not too far going toward Reno on Interstate 80. And he did have 2 other companions with him. However, they remained at the campsite while he went to the camps when hunting.
So let's start at the beginning. So Don entered the forest with his 2 hunting buddies, Vincent Alvarez and Tim Trueblood. They got separated. Don ends up sort of making like a little camp because he realizes he's not going to be able to get back to his buddies in the main camp, which is no big deal because this guy is a true hunter. He's been out in the woods his whole life. It's no fear. Yeah. He's a survival man. He knows what he's doing. He has his bow. He has his arrows. He's ready to go. So he's like, I'll just hole up here and then I'll be able to find my way back in the morning. No big deal. And then he starts seeing these lights, but the lights aren't what he thinks. He thinks that maybe his buddies are like maybe come across a national forester and said, look, my buddy's gone. We haven't seen him in a while. Maybe we should start looking. Well, obviously that wasn't it. It ends up to be a UFO. One of the other guys ends up seeing the same light and thinks that it's a slow meteorite, correct?
Right, correct.
Okay.
That was Mr. Alvarez was the other gentleman.
He ends up thinking, well, there's light. Maybe I'll set a fire, and puts 3 fires down so that he can tell him where he is. A few minutes later, he sees these beings. Like did the fires go out or not? I can't remember if the fires actually went out. I think they actually kicked one of the fires out, correct?
Right, when one of the robotic creatures came. And I was just wondering, Tiffany, if this would be a good time to play one of the audio cassettes there.
Yeah, definitely. Tell us about this first clip, please.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to share with you, we slightly edited the audio clips. Normally there was some long pauses and all that, so we went ahead and kind of cut out the pauses, but at least you'll get the feel for what he's seen in his description. So at this particular audio clip is when he describes how he's walking, and then later does see this mothership as he describes it as it arrives. So we can go ahead.
And this is Don, correct? This is Don speaking.
Trump.
I saw a light. It looked like a lantern going up and down a trail, but then it came over the top of a tree, and I got kind of excited then because I thought it was a helicopter from the Forest Service. I stood between 2 of the fires that I built on the rock and waved my arms and yelled and screamed, and finally that light started coming towards me. So I was really relieved then because I thought it was a helicopter still, until it got within, maybe 60 feet or yards. I'm not sure the distance at night, but it just hovered there with no sound. So then I panicked because I knew it was no helicopter. I thought it was something from outer space, but it looked like all I could see is about an 8-inch glow. So I thought it was just a little tiny, flying saucer. And then I kind of panicked, and I threw my bow up in the tree again and hand walked out there that limb and got up in the tree. I had all camouflage clothing on, so I figured, well, they won't see me here, But then this light went a half circle around me over the canyon. Then I could see the shadow of the whole spacecraft, and that was just a light that was on the nose of it.
Can you imagine being there and it's seeing this light, and all of a sudden you see this craft hovering right above you? It's from out of this world. Obviously, he was frightened, Mm-hmm. And at the same time, this thing made no noise whatsoever. So, the thing that I was thinking about this was, I wonder what was their thoughts, these aliens. I mean, here they're coming out of nowhere, and you find a person up in a tree. It's like, You wonder what their reaction was. But obviously they were curious. As he was out there, he noticed that this large cylinder had like 3 panels on the side. I think it was about approximately 150 feet in length is what he estimated.
So you mean panels as in windows that could be seen through?
Yeah, large windows, or they were lit inside, but all of a sudden the one in the center went open, and then a smaller ship was ejected out of it. So our next clip, if we can, it talks about that scout ship when it arrives.
And then I saw 3 panels of light, like windows or whatever, and I saw a flash come from the bottom of the center one, and just saw a dark object go down in the canyon, and then I lost track of it. Then the next thing I saw a little blinking light up on the top of originally where the first one came from. Well, at that time, all I saw was a flash and saw a dark object go down.
The dark object, what shape was it?
Well, I couldn't really say. It went so fast. But then I saw when it landed up on the ridge that I could see like a half. I could only see part of the top, but it had a little light on it. Looked like the top of a flying saucer that I'd seen in pictures.
Like a dome? Or
yes. Yeah, like a dome.
So you described this craft like it was round and had a dome. In the book, he actually gives the dimensions of it. He said it was approximately 20 feet wide and 30 feet in length and tall. This was a ship that all of a sudden brought these beings, which he'll describe shortly, these humanoids. Later, another type of creature, which was the robot. So if we can go with the third vignette audio clip, and he'll describe exactly what happened when the humanoids started to arrive.
And I heard some thrashing through the brush, and probably 5-10 minutes, these 2 humanoids come out of the brush, and they kind of broke some of the brush off and was looking at it. And then they came straight underneath the tree and looked up at me. And I knew right then I was fingered.
They found you?
Yeah, they found me.
Can you describe them for us? Tell us briefly what they were.
Yeah, they looked like 4 to 5 feet. Of course, I'm looking down at them, so they'd be shorter than they probably are. And they had a silvery, like a one-piece suit on, and it seemed like it had the joints, puffy joints, on the shoulders and the elbows, and the legs I didn't see that clear.
Were you able to see their faces?
No, it was just a kind of a dark shadow. I could see the 2 like eyes that looked like welding goggles to me. They were the same as welding goggles, about 2 inches in diameter. It reminded me, just like I said, like a welding goggles. And then the rest of the face was kind of a blur. I couldn't see looking down at them.
I just was curious what your thoughts were based on the description of what he gave about these humanoids.
Well, it's interesting.
Different, huh?
Yeah, it sounds interesting. What it reminds me of a little bit is some of the short, stockier beings that Whitley Strieber sometimes describes. Right. But then again, you've got these outfits and these hoods or like helmets that are attached to these. But it sort of sounds like a spacesuit that is very popular. It's something we've used as well. And then again, they do sound like little scientists, which is sort of what Whitley described as the doctors. And I don't know, the way that he described those beings, it doesn't sound like they're looking for him. Just sounds like they're out there and they stumble across him.
Yes, that's what I find very, very interesting. And again, the fact that they were wearing suits, in my eyes, I began thinking, what if those were protective suits?
Well, yeah. I mean, your different gravity forces in different areas. I mean, we all have different forms of gravity or gravitational fields on each planet. We know that for a fact. We can get crushed in different atmospheres or different environments. Maybe this is to keep them. That's not even a real question. It's a question that not every entity wears one. How's that?
Yeah, and based on descriptions from other witnesses, this one was quite unique. I began thinking just perhaps they were wearing that protective clothing in order to not to contaminate in a different environment. So just maybe, as you know, many of our scientists do wear protective clothing for their protection, but also not to create any sort of cross-contamination on bacteria or whatever. So there's a lot of speculation on that. Again, just going back to those goggles or those eyes, they're big, and the face was flat. And later, he'll go back. He'll remember that. I mean, here he was just a couple of feet away looking downward at them. When he climbed up that pine tree, he had climbed up, he was about at least 12 feet. He was standing on a limb, and he had basically, later, he had tied himself to the pole. To the
using his belt, right?
Exactly. I mean, he was resourceful, obviously.
Right.
But,
yeah, absolutely.
But then another creature arrived. These weren't a humanoid per se, but if we can go ahead and play the next audio clip.
Then I saw two flashing red-orange eyes just picking its way down the ridge, just between the rocks and around them and everything, and come down and was on this big boulder, this big flat rock. And then he kind of looked up at me, and he moved his hand through the fires, cinders, and kind of scattered them. Then he come down up on the rock. He was about 7 feet from me. And then he touched his mouth, and kind of a steam vapor come out of his mouth, and it lit up his face so I could see some detail. And then I blacked out when that steam hit me. Kind of took the air from me. And I'd gasp for air and then black out. And I fell over my bow. And that's the only thing that kept me in the tree. And then, so I figured they were out to get me then.
The eyes of this other creature, like the robot, what did that look like to you?
And it had kind of like fire. It's kind of a orangish, reddish orange, or yellowish orange. It kind of flickered like fire. And they're about the same diameter, about 2 inches in diameter as the humanoids.
Did you hear any noise between them, any communication? Was there any?
You know, I heard kind of a cooing, or almost like an owl, but it could have been an owl, that up there. But it just kind of fit in with them.
Don was actually under stress at this point, and you can tell that he is trying to figure out what the hell's going on. First of all, there were two entities, and they're sort of just checking the area out, and then something else happens, and he's up in a tree. He's trying to stay out of their way, right?
Yes.
And at this point, I can't even understand just being a witness to an event like this. I've had my experiences, but they're not like this. They're very different. This is a hunter up in a tree, a man who knows how to handle himself. He knows how to handle his weapon, but he also has not felt completely threatened by the two entities that seem like biological beings to this point. So he has not used his weapon against them. Whereas a lot of people today, you have this idea, oh gosh, you gotta kill the aliens because of what pop culture has told us to do. Attack first, ask questions later. But he didn't do that. He was smart enough to keep his head about him, correct?
Correct. That was the thing about him. He used his wits, and something had told him not to harm these humanoids because they weren't doing anything against them. It was later, as we'll find out, it was the robot. And so he thought about it, and he would have thought, what are the consequences? Imagine if he would have killed one of these guys. What would happen to him?
He's not a murderer.
Yeah.
He's a hunter. That kind of person. No, he's a hunter for food. He's not just a random killer. You can tell that.
And also, as a hunter, he he respected quite a bit the wildlife, and from what he told me, he wasn't that lucky in shooting at a deer at times, but that's what he did, and he didn't carry arms. That was the other aspect of this. He didn't have a rifle or a gun. Who knows what would have been the situation had he done. But the next clip describes the situation changes. It's a lot more complicated now that this robot is coming close to the tree, and these two beings are also trying to climb up the tree and trying to grab him, but they can't. And we may hear how he avoids being captured by him shaking the tree, and that startled these beings. So if we can go to the next audio, and we're going to hear his ordeal.
I had a 60-pound bow, which is a very high velocity. Seeing how the robot's the only thing that was causing me harm, I shot the chest area, and it has the velocity of a rifle at that distance, because I'm only about 7-8 feet from him. And when I hit the chest, the sparks would fly like an arc welder kind of. And then that robot backed up and almost knocked him down. He kind of fell back against a rock, and the two at the bottom took off and headed for the brush and stood out there about 30 feet from me. And then I shot 2 more arrows, and about the same time sequence. These 2 humanoids would, every time I'd shoot, they'd go back up into the brush, just almost out of sight from me. Then I ran out of arrows, so I only had 3 left, and I thought, well, that's when pomade hair is just, the cap I had on was just soaked with oil.
This is for your hair?
Yeah, from my hair, yeah, pomade. And I always carried all kinds of books of matches with me when I hunted. And so I lit that cap, and it just blazed up, and I dropped it down the base of the tree. And just in that instant, they moved back about 12, 15 feet, and I glanced over at the ship that was over the canyon, kind of almost level with me, and it was almost out of sight. It was just like a star. It moved that fast, just in that second. So then I got the idea that they're scared of fire. So I burned everything but my T-shirt and my jeans, and come to find out later on that it was 32 degrees out, and I was shaking and kind of overexposed for the weather. Oh, when I after my hat, I threw my canteen down, and they'd picked it up and looked at it and threw it back down. And at one time I had a bunch of change, and I threw it down, and they all kind of gathered around it. Somebody told me on the coins that it gets dates, it gets pictures, so maybe that was the reason they got most of the coins.
But you didn't find any?
No.
What about the robot creature? What did this...
Well, after I started burning stuff and throwing it down, and I even tied some of my shirt that I ripped up to a compass so I could try to hit some brush, because there wasn't nothing right underneath the tree. And then I caught a little pile of brush on fire. I figured that would bring the cavalry. But when I run out of stuff to burn, I headed for the top of the tree. And then it was pretty sparse tree. I could see down to the ground. And I broke off the top and threw it down. And anytime I throw down or shake the tree, these humanoids would back up. When I was up in the top of that tree, I thought about just jumping off and jumping down the canyon and just killing myself. But the only thing that kept me going is I had the little girl, my wife, and that kept me fighting.
Wow. We are, this part I'll probably keep on the show, but we are, with tonight's show, guys, it's like we're living it. We are.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like that too.
Do you feel that? I do too.
Yeah, I feel the anxiety.
Wow, I do. Tiffany, but real quick, how's your bow game?
You know what? He's talking about a 60-pound bow, which you can use a 40-pound bow to kill a deer. 60-pound is better because of the velocity, but it's possible. With me, I can pull a 40, and I'm telling you, when it shoots, it is powerful. And the idea of hitting metal or hitting something and it ricocheting off, I've seen it happen, and you don't want to be around when it does.
Oh. You know
Carrying
what?
a bow up the tree,
Yeah.
first of all, a challenge, but I just can't imagine making the decision to try to, first of all, not harm somebody who's a living being.
Yes.
Because they're a humanoid. They look like little humans under some type of helmet. You know that they're people. However you want to look at it, they're people. It's the stress and anxiety that he is probably encountering at that moment when he's taking his clothes off, when he's taking his helmet, his hat and his outer gear, and trying to figure out what is expendable and what is necessary for him to keep on his body to keep from succumbing to the elements. I mean, it's 30 degrees, 32 degrees out, and he knows he can't burn everything. What's he going to do? Sit in a tree for the next 5, 6, 10 hours? The event was a 12-hour event.
Right. I'm going to digress here a little bit. When it comes to the whole bow thing, honestly, have no clue on what you just said as far as 40 pounds, 60 pounds. I have to take your word for it, but I know...
It just means how much
force or...
No. It's the weight of pulling back the string.
Okay.
So it's 40 pounds of strength. It takes it's like carrying 40 pounds by pulling it back. It's like a 40-pound pull or a 60-pound pull, like pulling it back 60 pounds.
Well, I think I'll speak for all of our male audience, our male fans, viewers, people who listen to the show. The notion that the visual that you just gave them on you pulling a bow probably did wonders for them tonight. It's a first. We've never heard you go there with the whole bow.
Oh, do y'all want to hear about me making bullets at the age of 5? Yes, I am a born and bred redneck.
God love you. But please continue.
If you notice, I did put on the website there a photo of Don Shrum holding the bow with a bow, and there's a arrowhead. And that's the type of arrowhead that he actually used when he shot at the robot. And like he said, it hit the robot like the velocity of a bullet. It knocked this robot back several feet.
Right, and it made a spark. You could see like an electrical spark coming off of it, which makes sense. I mean, if it's metal on metal sparks. Exactly,
and I think, and also the fact that he was very resourceful. As you know, as he said, he had this. His hat was full of hair oil, and I forgot the name of the oil. Pomade. Pomade, yes. That was very, very common back then. And it's basically like hair grease. But it just caught on fire very quickly. And as he stated, he broke down the limbs from the tree and threw it at them. And then I think the thing that really got me, too, was the canteen. When he threw it at them, they just went up and looked at it, and then they just threw it back down. And
it didn't have any symbols on it. It probably was just a plastic or metal at that time. Yeah.
Yes, it was one of those military canteens. Well,
so a green, probably a green canteen. Yeah.
Right. It had like the green cloth around it. But what got me was, he showed me the canteen, and then I held it, and I thought, gee, this is interesting. I'm holding an artifact that was held by another being from another world. Mm-hmm. I thought that just struck me for a moment there. And then the fact that he mentioned about the coins and how they were interested in the coins that he was throwing at them. They actually picked them up and they were looking at them. Anyway, it gets a little more complicated. He obviously he was battling back and forth. This one robot would start emitting this vapor up into the tree, and he would become unconscious. And then later, and then within a few minutes, he would gain consciousness, and he could see that these beings were still trying to climb up the tree and get him. So that's when he decided to go further up on the tree and use the canteen belt that he had, and he tied himself around the trunk of the tree just to keep him from falling down. So then it gets a little more hairy. There was another scout ship that arrived and another robot.
Let me jump in here. At any point, did he think that any action or reaction that he was doing could potentially cause an intergalactic war? What if he would have done something that their reaction was like, oh, we can't deal with this. Where's the reinforcement?
Yeah, we're the next 100 million entities coming to defend us.
Yeah, so...
And the other thing I forgot to mention, as he stated, they were afraid of fire. When he used fire, that spaceship bolted out. It just moved away from the scene, and they were totally surprised by it.
You know, it's funny you say, because the fire thing, because do you remember the movie Signs?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Great movie. To me, I don't think that's so far-fetched, the way M. Night played it out. And the fact that it was, in this case, what was the kryptonite for the aliens in that movie? Not fire, but water.
Water.
Water. They were afraid of water. Yes.
Right. So
it burned them.
It burned them. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. You're right. But you know, what's funny is what can fire do? Fire can explode. Fire can burn uncontrollably. You know, look at the napalm. You never know what the potential of something like that is. So maybe they see it as the extreme that it can be, not just that little flame.
Yeah. Although we have about 15 to 16 audio clips, so I'm just giving you just a portion of what had occurred. But he, one of the things that he had mentioned was he heard a pack of coyotes yelling, and then he went ahead and started to yell as a coyote, thinking he's going to bring in, the cavalry, more or less. But again, he was just thinking of all these possibilities. It was all about survival. Mm-hmm. That's what his goal was. He needed to get out of a very difficult situation. But going back, when that scout ship had arrived, the other one, this other robot creature came right up to the tree. These two robots were facing each other. All of a sudden, there's these electrical bolts of lightning almost going between them, and then this huge, massive vapor cloud went right up to the tree, and it knocked him out, unconscious, until early in the morning. So if we can go to the next audio clip.
After I went to the top of the tree, I had a military belt, and I moved it out to the last hitch and put it around me and the tree. So in case I did get gassed, I wouldn't fall down. And then finally, these two humanoids stepped back from the tree, and another robot came, and there was two just about the same place that the two humanoids were. And they stood facing each other, and flames, just like lightning, real bright, and just came between them. And then the gas was so thick coming up the tree that it would dissipate just about the time I got to me. But then that's when I'd start to gasp for air, and then when I woke up from that, it was light, but the sun hadn't come up yet. And I was just hanging by my belt, my head down, my feet down, and they were gone. Well, I knew I made it. I lived through the night.
Just to go back, did you fall asleep, or this gas? Did it overwhelm you?
Yeah, that's when it completely engulfed the whole tree and got up to me, and I don't know how long I was out, but it was just you could see just a dim glow of the sun on the clouds and stuff, not clouds, but in the sky. And then when I woke up, it was light, but the sun hadn't come up yet. I got down and I found my compass and no coins. The coins were gone, and my canteen. But I knew which way I shot the arrow and which way it would arc. So I found 2 of them, and then tried to make my way back to camp. And I got almost to camp, and I just kind of fatigue and everything. I just laid down, and I heard my hunting buddy, whistling, and I yelled at him, and he come pick me up and help me to camp. I slept for about 6 hours because I'd been up all night, and then they didn't bug me until I woke up. Then I told them more of the story.
What was their reaction?
Well, they believed me because they saw the condition I was in.
So I have a question. Now, reading the actual account, I had the impression that this happened multiple times throughout the night, the gassing. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It did, yes.
Okay. So during each little interlude, he'd wake up and find the 2 entities, the 2 beings, actually trying to climb up a tree. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
So were they? I wonder if they were fumbling, if they didn't really know how to climb a tree, or if they were if the time that he was unconscious from the gas, if it just was short and not long enough for them to accomplish the task of climbing the tree.
Yeah, that's a good question, because when he would become conscious, obviously he would look and see these humanoids trying to climb back up, and then again there would be another round of gassing toward him. And it wasn't until later when the other rock creature came, and you had 2 of them, and they both worked together and it created this huge, enormous plume of vapor. That's the one finally knocked him out for a while. So he woke up, and then, as he stated, he was able to find some of his items and get back to the campsite. And he slept like for 6 hours. So obviously, and then later, we're going to get into another interesting part of the story, the after effects and what he did, and then also his where him and his family were interviewed by Air Force representatives. So that's the other aspect of this story.
So wait, did he contact the Air Force? Or did he contact the Air Force?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It was from his mother-in-law knew an astronomer, and they had shared the story with the astronomer, and then the astronomer said it would probably be a good idea if they spoke with someone from the Air Force. So he wrote a letter, and finally they had contacted him that they would go ahead and interview Mr. Don Schrum and his wife. Which, if we're ready, I think this is the last sound bite. So if we're able to go that, this is the after effects. How did this affect him? It was a traumatic experience, obviously.
How has this affected you? Did you have any nightmares or?
Well, for a year, I had, screaming nightmares. I'd wake up yelling, those eyes, and I'd be just a cold sweat, just be drenched with sweat.
So what happened with the Air Force?
Well, they made an appointment with 2 supposed representatives of the Air Force, and they tried to disillusion me. They said, well, the Japanese might have had somebody up there, they were still... And they said it was Boy Scouts dressed up, in costume just to scare somebody. And I said, yeah, I'm sure they're going to spend all night and keep a guy in a tree, Oh, then they said the Army probably bivouacked up there and was in a training camp. So my father-in-law was in the Air Force. So he called and found out there was no military in that area for any reason, because it was a pretty desolate area. And they tried to disillusion me in every way they could. And they took the Arrowhead, the main one, and they said, well, we'll get back to you, and you can have this back as soon as we get through with it, which I never did. But when I went back up there during rifle season, I found the other arrow, the 3rd one. And when we went back, the area had been raked. There's an area probably 50 feet around that tree, and there was cigarette packages and cigar butts, and so I know the Air Force checked it out pretty good. And they had an easy way to find it because there's an orange circle around that tree where it had caught little fires, and it was showing orange, so they had no problem finding it. And I marked on the map that they had where it was, the location.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? He was contacted by these Air Force officials. They were from McClellan Air Force Base. What was interesting was that McClellan Air Force Base is a part of the Air Force Logistics Command, but the headquarters are at Wright-Patterson Field near Dayton, Ohio. What makes this interesting, Tiffany and Kevin, is that the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is where the Intelligence Division has been studying UFOs since 1937. So here you have these two Air Force officials. One was a Captain McLeod, and the other was a Master Sergeant R. Barnes, and they were the ones that came to speak with Don. And as you heard Don, they were from that, hey, maybe it was Boy Scouts doing a prank, or maybe there were Japanese soldiers, or maybe
there was serious? Japanese soldiers?
Yes.
Wow. What?
Remember, this is 1964, so it was about...
You might as well say that they're Nazis that made it to the mountains of, where was it again? Fayetteville, Arkansas? No, where was it?
Oh, Fayetteville.
Sierra Nevada mountains.
Yes.
So yeah, we've got Nazis and Japanese that are just roaming the mountains with little bitty short ones. Now that's a stretch, isn't it?
Yes.
Why is it always a stretch?
Well, obviously, it was a campaign that they had to discredit him. Yes, that was part of the plan, part of the protocol. Go ahead and discredit the witness. The fact that made him very, very upset. The other aspect of this is that he went back, as he mentioned, back to the actual campsite, or back to the tree with his brother and other family members and friends, and they found that the area was completely raked, and they found cigarette butts and everything, and it was easy for them to locate the tree. So obviously there was more to the story. And the thing about it is that he did find two of the arrows, and he loaned those two arrows. Actually, Paul Cerny had collect the arrowheads because there was residue that was collected from the hit of the robot.
That's what I was wondering. Is there any evidence from there of anything unusual?
Well, apparently, what happened was that the residue got lost in transit, and there wasn't enough of it to be collected. And those two particular arrows were never returned to him.
Yeah. And
also, but he did mention that he did find one of them when he went back to the campsite. So he had this interesting experience that it took him quite a long time to get over this. The fact that one thing I forgot to mention was that the reason why we didn't hear too much about this particular case, Tiffany and Kevin, was the former investigator, Paul Cerny, made sure of his took precautions to protect his anonymity, because Don and the other two friends of his, they had worked for a company called Aerojet, and Aerojet was a missile contractor based out of Sacramento, and they made all these missiles, like the Polaris missile for the Navy submarines, the Titan and the Minuteman, and that. So the big fear that they had was they're going to lose their jobs. Had gotten out. So they, Paul made sure to use an anonymous name in order to protect his identity. But gradually, the story came out, and there were different variations, there were different people that wrote about the story, but they left out important details, or they added in things that didn't really happen. And it wasn't until we met with, both Noe and I met with the Shrums, and what they wanted was a book. They wanted a book that was written the way it happened. that was their goal, and we made it happen. We fulfilled the obligation when we wrote the book. And Mrs. Shrum, she died about 5 years ago from cancer. And then Mr. Don Shrum, we lost him this year in early February. So they were great people. That's the sadness about being involved in these cases. You develop a very good relationship with their friends. And yet these are people that weren't looking for any notoriety or anything. They just wanted their story told. They were getting jerked around by the Air Force, and they were concerned about how their case was going to be looked at. They didn't want to become laughing stocks. They're trying to share the truth. And, this is the stuff that normally what happens, unfortunately, when you have people or individuals that have had something extraordinary happen to them, and then their own family members may not believe them. But the beauty of this case was that, thank God, that his son, Dan Shrum, had recorded this particular interview that we had, and we were able to put all our notes together to create the book and also have the audio and visual clips of the interview. So it's a case that shouldn't be forgotten, obviously, because there's a lot of history behind this. And what's extraordinary is that we're starting to find other cases that maybe at another time, Tiffany, we can talk about that, but it's other cases where witnesses had to climb up a tree to avoid predators, and then they had their unusual encounter with entities and that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would actually love to go into that, but I don't think it's going to happen tonight.
Yeah.
But
you're going to have me back.
I will. We will have to absolutely have you back.
Yes.
But, what's amazing is that he survived. He survived this event. He survived this, what could only be considered an attack in the end, even though it didn't necessarily appear to be so in the beginning. He survived. He was able to tell his tale. Did he have any other experiences with extraterrestrials after this point? Do you know?
Well, one of the things after the experience was that he would have these nightmares, and then he would have these sensations when he would see a bright light flying above him. He would look at it and just stare at it. And sometimes his family would catch him looking up in the sky at night, and then he would say, "It's one of them."
Oh my gosh!
So, and where he lives is not that far, probably like within an hour, no less than an hour from the actual hunting area where he went. So it's within proximity. Yeah, he would. His friends would get nervous when he would share his story or when he would share what was going on with him, and so his hunting buddies were also very concerned about them going out there. It affected their hunting.
Mm-hmm. Word for word, the sound bites that you have, which was amazing.
Yes.
It was very, very true to what his words were, and I'm amazed at that. And I applaud your ability to do that, and I think they would have too. So I highly recommend it. So let's get your contact information for our listeners so that they can look into this information and maybe ask you some questions personally.
Sure. Well, Tiffany, for members of the audience that are interested in getting the book, they can go to our website, which is roswellbooks.com. That's plural, roswellbooks.com. And they can purchase a book. It'll connect them with Amazon. And also we have an audio version now. You could download the audio, so it basically follows the book. The gentleman that does the narration does it word by word and does an excellent job. So for those people that aren't that are interested in listening to the story while they're driving, it's a great piece of work. Definitely, I would highly recommend it.
And what's your contact info?
People that are interested they can contact me on my Facebook, which is Ruben Uriarte, Uriarte, and I do have an email, which is Ruben _Uriarte, Uriarte @ hotmail.com.
Well, we thank you so much for joining us and actually working through our technical issues this evening. It's been a really great, fun time, and I know that Kevin loves the idea of me pulling a bow back and shooting it.
Not just me.
It was a perfect.
Not just me, Tiffany. I'm doing all of our male audience a favor. We got to get that
post
on
a picture sometime.
Yeah, I was
How's
going to
that?
say we got to get a picture of you doing that. That would. Yeah.
All right. Well, I won't be shooting at any robots anytime soon. So,
or husband, leave him off the list.
well, he better be on his best behavior.
I know. I'm just saying.
It's been a pleasure this evening.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, and I'm glad that we were able to get me on the show and be able to share with you this very unique case. And thank you again so much.
Absolutely. You have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and send Noe our love.
Yeah.
We'll do.
We'll.
All right.
We will connect because I do feel like, Tiffany, we've got more stories that we can share.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he's.
Oh, yeah. He absolutely.
He's a keeper. He's a keeper.
Oh, yeah. But he actually says that he has a story that has, what did you say, 17 similarities between this case and another?
Oh, yeah. The other one is fascinating. Totally mind-blowing.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into that one next time.
Sounds like part 2.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Ruben,
right.
thanks so much, brother, for your time tonight.
Oh, you're welcome, Kevin. Have
Good
a
stuff.
good one, both
Yes.
of you.
At no time were any animals or people hurt during this presentation of Shooting from the Lip.